I will speak, Mr. Speaker, on the recently concluded deal between TB5 and ABS-CBN.
The gentleman has 10 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise on a question of privilege. Last week, the merger between ABS-CBN and TB5 was announced. I think it was met by public skepticism based on the initial requests of TV stations and radio stations requiring comments from this representation. Mr. Speaker, to be honest, I think the merger left a bad taste in the mouth. It leaves much to be desired. It is public knowledge, Mr. Speaker, that 2 years ago, on the application for renewal of ABS-CBN's franchise, this Congress, or the 17th Congress to be more particular, denied the application for renewal because the 17th Congress was able to establish several violations that justified the denial of that franchise. What are these, Mr. Speaker? I can recall a long list of violations. ABS-CBN did not have a permit on the digital broadcast for all their channels. It has no permit for the encryption of its signal and its contents. ABS-CBN violated the cease and desist order issued by the National Telecommunications Commission. ABS-CBN also operated and sold illegally millions of TV Plus black boxes without the approval of the National Telecommunications Commission. ABS-CBN also made telecast on pay-per-view even without the authority of the conditional access system by the NTC. Mr. Speaker, there were flagrant violations, not only the rules and laws, but also the Constitution. I think even the Constitution was desecrated by ABS-CBN by violating the exclusive Filipino ownership and management of mass media by the issuance of what we call the Philippine depositary receipts. And as I speak today, Mr. Speaker, several employees of ABS-CBN who were terminated illegally by that network won their cases in the Supreme Court, 2 cases of regularization and 6 cases of illegal dismissal. These cases were won in the Supreme Court, Mr. Speaker. And 2 of these already had entry of judgment issued by the Supreme Court. But the NLRC, Mr. Speaker, for unknown reasons, did not even lift a finger to help the workers. Some of them are older already, and some are dying already, Mr. Speaker. I can probably blame the concerned agencies of government who did not act on these violations. For example, the BIR promised at that time that they will look into those allegations of non-payment of taxes, of correct taxes, by employing a dubious subsidiary called Big Dipper to operate like a tax shield in order to evade the payment of rightful taxes, billions of taxes due to the government, Mr. Speaker. There is a subsisting memorandum order of NTC, Mr. Speaker, that a franchise grantee should not enter into commercial agreements in which the NTC has jurisdiction with those companies or parties that have obligations to the national government or the national government. It is my humble submission, Your Honor, Mr. Speaker, that these violations, oh, by the way, Mr. Speaker, this representation calculated the administrative penalties that should be paid by ABS-CBN to the government. And my calculations totaled 1.6 trillion pesos. If this can be considered as obligations to the national government, then the NTC order, again, should be applied. Ang problema kasi, Mr. Speaker, this concerns agencies, NTC, the BIR, although it promised to look into the allegations of these tax evasion schemes, did not bother. They lack the vigilance. They did not summon the agency or even the sense of duty required by the respective offices. And by every measure, Mr. Speaker, I think even TB5 has some obligations in this deal. With the substantial purchase, Mr. Speaker, of the outstanding stocks of ABS-CBN, I believe Section 10 of the franchise of TB5 was violated because the rights and obligations have virtually been transferred to ABS-CBN. Kung pwede ba, Mr. Speaker, na ang isang network na hindi na natin binigyan ng lisensya because of this established violations, wala na siyang prangkisa. Pwede ba siyang sumakay ng ganun-ganun lang without settling the obligations to the country, to the government? Is it possible that something that cannot be achieved or obtained directly can be obtained indirectly? I think this is a basic dictum in law, Mr. Speaker. We cannot do that. Section 10 of the franchise of TB5 also prohibits merger with other entities without prior approval of Congress. Wala pa po tayong approval. So I said, this particular deal must be looked into, Mr. Speaker. And I think, because of this deal, we have yet to have let the proverbial cat out of the bag, Mr. Speaker. Why? MediaQuest, the parent company of TB5, is owned by PLDT Beneficial Trust Fund. And the grapevine, Mr. Speaker, is so loud that PLDT Beneficial Trust Fund is owned by an Indonesian national. So if we will reminisce, Mr. Speaker, that the PDRs were utilized indirectly as conduits for foreigners to own mass media in this country by desecrating and circumventing the very constitution that we have. Baka naman ang mangyari, ganito rin, Mr. Speaker. Magigising na lang tayo and we will have to see deja vu once again. Mr. Speaker, somebody said that the only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing. I humbly seek the good men of this chamber, Mr. Speaker, to unite and rally behind a good cause and do something. Maraming salamat po, Mr. Speaker.
The Honorable Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the speech of the Honorable Rodante Marcoleta be referred to the Committee on Rules for its appropriate action.
Is there any objection? Chair hears none. The motion is approved.
Mr. Speaker, today being a Monday and pursuant to our rules, I move that we open the privilege hour.
Session suspended.
Mr. Speaker,
Session is resumed.
I move that we recognize the Honorable Edsel Lagman.
Mr.
The
Speaker,
Honorable Lagman, what is the pleasure of the
I
the
rise
gentleman
on
from
a question of
Albay?
personal and collective privilege.
The gentleman has 10 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the hierarchy of civil liberties, the freedom of expression, which includes free speech and free press, is accorded premium protection. Consequently, as held by the Supreme Court in Chavez versus Gonzalez, and I quote, any attempt to restrict it must be met with an examination so critical that only a danger that is clear and present would be allowed to curtail it. Chavez versus Gonzalez involved the directives of the then Justice Secretary Raul Gonzalez and the National Telecommunications Commission to all media outlets not to publish under the pain of violating the Anti-Wiretapping Act the tape of the conversation of certain personalities on the alleged manipulation of the 2004 election results. The Supreme Court nullified the official directives of the respondents, warning the media on airing the alleged wiretap conversation for constituting unconstitutional prior restraint on the exercise of freedom of speech and of the press, or the freedom of expression. Chief Justice Reynaldo Puno, the ponente of Chavez versus Gonzalez, stressed that, and I quote, the right belongs as well, if not more, to those who question, who do not conform, who differ. To be truly meaningful, freedom of speech and of the press should allow and even encourage the articulation of the unorthodox view, though it be hostile or derided by others, or though such view induces a condition of unrest, creates dissatisfaction with conditions as they are, or even steers people to anger, unquote. According to Liu Xiaobo, the Chinese writer, literary critic, human rights activist, and Nobel Prize awardee, quote, freedom of expression is the foundation of human rights, the source of humanity, and the mother of truth, unquote. Thus, the Bill of Rights under Article 3 of the Philippine Constitution unequivocally provides, and I quote, no law shall be passed abridging the freedom of press, of expression, or of the press, unquote. It is in the foregoing context that Memorandum Number 2022-0663, dated August 9, 2012, of the Commission sa Wikang Filipino, banning from libraries in schools 5 books in Filipino for being, quote, subversive, unquote, and, quote, anti-government, unquote, is a patently unconstitutional edict, an obtrusive weapon of thought control, an unmitigated censorship, and a wanton assault on academic freedom. The subject memorandum is condemnable and unwarranted for the following reasons, Mr. Speaker. 1, it defiles the constitutionally guaranteed freedom of expression and academic freedom which shall be enjoyed in all institutions of higher learning. Section 5.2 of Article 14. 2, the KWF has no power and is not authorized under Republic Act 7104 its enabling statute to ban and censor writings in Filipino. Its principal mandate is to ensure and promote the evolution and development and further enrichment of Filipino as a national language of the Philippines on the basis of existing Philippine and other languages. It has the power to enhance and develop Filipino as the national language, but not to destroy and proscribe writings in Filipino. 3, the controversial memorandum was signed only by 2 full-time commissioners, namely Commissioners Carmelita Abdurrahman and Benjamin Mondillo, out of 11 commissioners, including Chairman Arthur Casanova. In other words, Mr. Speaker, distinguished colleagues, the memorandum does not have the conformity of the requisite majority of the commissioners. Is that it does not even have the imprimatur of the chairman. Number 4, no less than the commission itself has published 3 of the 5 books, namely Teatro Political 2 by Malu Jacob, Kalatas, Mga Kwentong Bayan at Kwentong Buhay by Romel Rodriguez, and May Hadlang ang Umaga by Don Pagusara. 5, the Commission is not an adjunct of the National Task Force to End Local Communist Armed Conflict, which is the dominant red-tagging agency of the government. 6, neither is it an extension of the Anti-Terrorism Council, which is tasked to enforce the Anti-Terrorism Act of 2020, or RA number 11479. And 7, the action of the KWF of banning the subject books for purportedly violating Section 9 of Republic Act number 11479 on, quote, inciting to commit treason, unquote, is an unwarranted sanction by an unauthorized agency without trial and due process. The following, Mr. Speaker, are the suggested remedies against the improvident memorandum. 1, the majority of the Commission can motu proprio withdraw the memorandum. 2, the Office of the President, to which the KFW is under by provision of law, can order the nullification and withdrawal of the memorandum. And 3, judicial recourse can be availed of by any interested party by filing a petition for certiorari and prohibition under Rule 65 of the Rules of Court without prayer for a temporary restraining order. Mr. Speaker, distinguished colleagues, without prejudice to the foregoing remedies, as I speak this afternoon, a resolution is being filed for a joint investigation in aid of legislation by the Committees on Human Rights, Basic Education and Culture, and Higher and Technical Education on the issuance of this unlawful memorandum. This censurable memorandum has horrific precedents. 1, the first Chinese emperor, Kim Xiu Huang, who united China after blood inundated the vast Chinese terrain, ordered in 213 BCE the burning of books to avoid scholars' comparison of his reign with the past. He also had some 160 scholars buried alive for possessing the forbidden books. The grave of the infamous emperor is guarded by the famed Terracotta warriors, whose more than life-size statues depict the faces of the generals, of the despots' generals. 3, the Roman Catholic Church has the Index Librorum Prohibitorium, published in 1959, which banned the proscribed books to prevent the contamination of the faith or the corruption of morals through the reading of theologically erroneous or immoral books. The index was used up to 1966, or for over 4 centuries. The index also banned works ranging from love stories to philosophical treatises to political theory. The censored authors included, among others, David Hume, Emile Zola, Jean-Paul Sartre, John Milton, Immanuel Kant, Voltaire, Francis Bacon, Daniel Defoe, and Nikos Kazantzakis, all stars in the literary constellation.
The gentleman, please wrap up.
Yes. The Nazi regime burned books considered as un-German starting on May 10, 1933, where over 25 volumes were put ablaze. The authors included were Albert Einstein, Sigmund Freud, together with American authors Ernest Hemingway and Helen Keller. During martial law, security guards would freeze persons and inspected bags of citizens for subversive materials, as if they were trained to discern what is subversive or not. The capture then and up to now of alleged dissidents invariably include the reported seizure of subversive materials. Before I end, Mr. Speaker, distinguished colleagues, let me share with you relevant quotations to ponder on. 1. English novelist, journalist, and critic George Orwell said, and I quote, "If liberty means anything at all, it means the right to tell people what they don't want to hear." Let me repeat that. To tell people what they do not want to hear. 2. American literary critic Henry Louis Gates declared, "Censorship is to the art as lynching is to justice." Former French President Nicolas Sarkozy asserted, "We must defend freedom of expression. And if I had to choose, I would prefer the excess of caricature over the excess of censure." And lastly, Salman Rushdie, the multi-awarded novelist and author of the Satanic Verses, who was savagely and repeatedly stabbed in New York last Saturday, August 13, 2022, and is currently recovering, emphasized, two things form the bedrock of any society: freedom of expression and the rule of law. If you do not have those things, you do not have a free country. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and distinguished colleagues.
Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move that we refer the speech of the Honorable Edsel Lagman to the Committee on Rules for its appropriate action.
Is there any objection? Chair hears none. Motion is approved.